Hello and welcome to Very Interesting. I'm your host, Barry Aycock. My guest today is a man of many stories, some written down in his books, others lived out through his career, family, and history. I'd like to welcome Stan Crader to the show. Stan, welcome.
Thank you.
Stan, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised. What was your early life like? And tell us about your family.
Well, I grew up in Marble Hill, Missouri, at a time that I consider maybe a magical time in America, certainly a sweet spot of the best years to come of age. It was a time when it seems like every small town could seal the borders at the city limits and be self-sustainable. We had a hat factory and then a shoe factory, and there's pallet factories around. It was a small town, 1,000 people. Actually, Marble Hill and Louisville were combined at the time, less than 1,000 people. But we had 3 car dealerships, a couple banks, appliance stores, a watch repair shop, a shoe repair shop. We had everything going for us. But for me, it was a great time, and for a lot of my friends, it was the same because we didn't have any barriers, or I guess you would call it self-barriers. We had to, we were kind of self-disciplined, so to speak, even though we were all about half nuts. And the stories in my books kind of share those stories. There's a time as a kid, we all had bicycles. By the age of 12 or 13, we all had motorcycles or mini bikes or something, and we could just go. The limit was as far away as you could get and come back on a tank of gasoline. My grandfather and a couple of cousins started an International Harvester farm equipment dealership in 1944. So I spent a lot of time there growing up. I was really lucky to have a place like that where I could go and just kind of hang out in the shop and learn about motors, learn about engines. And so my dad gave me, as soon as I could walk, I had a job. And it really wasn't a job. It was a way to make a little money, make a nickel, make a dime, make 50 cents and go to the store.
So you were doing a lot of loafing, but you was getting a great education at the same time.
It would kind of drive you crazy growing up because everybody knew your business. But then as I got older, it's a certain amount of security there too. Having had the chance to live other places, short periods of time, and you go into a filling station and you don't know anyone, that's a little scary for a kid that grows up in a small town where you know everybody and everybody knows you. So you know that they have your back, even though they might talk about you and say silly things about you from time to time. When things get rough, they're gonna back you up.
So Stan, we could sit here and talk about the rise and fall and the rise again of rural America. We could talk about Marble Hill all day. It's one of my favorite towns in the United States of America. My wife will be surprised to hear that. But you currently have Stihl distributorships in several states. Tell us a little bit about the history of your relationship with Stihl and how that evolved over the years.
My grandfather, as mentioned, started the International Harvester dealership in 1944 with some cousins. And in the early 50s, my dad joined the business. He bought his cousins out. And during the 50s, they started getting other lines to go along with farm equipment, mowers, bush hogs, chainsaws. And in 1959, we became a dealer. My dad and my grandfather became a dealer for Stihl. And my dad saw an ad in a paper where they were looking for distribution for eastern Missouri. And he responded to the ad. And for 40 chainsaws, he got the distribution rights for eastern Missouri. Highway 63 was the line, north and south. So he got the rights. 40 chainsaws, and they came in by train. We actually had train tracks coming through Marble Hill at the time. And I remember when they came in, we had a flatbed truck, and he and my grandfather mostly was fretting over, what are you going to do with 40 chainsaws? Because they'd sold like 5 the year before. And he explained the concept of going out and setting up dealers. The lawnboy distributor in Illinois decided chainsaws were never going to amount to anything, and so if the guy in Missouri wanted Illinois, he could just have it. So we gained the area in Illinois from Peoria south, and he was this lawnboy distributor was real good friends with the distributor in Osage Beach. They had Stihl for western Missouri. And he convinced that guy that chainsaws were never going to amount to anything either. And so we got the rest of Missouri at that time.
Sounds like your dad was a real visionary, though. Like we talked about, he got in on the ground floor.
He was a risk taker. He was an entrepreneur, and he wasn't afraid to. He didn't want to make mistakes, but he wasn't afraid to try something that may not work. It's funny because the last couple years of his life, he enjoyed college basketball, Southeast basketball, but he got to where he'd fall asleep. And so somebody had to go with him, and that somebody usually ended up being me when we drive to away games. And we had several conversations about Stihl, and he said people come up and they go, "Gosh, you were such a visionary to take on Stihl." Then knowing it was going to turn into what it is. He said, I had no idea. he said, we took a chance and we bought a pallet of chainsaws and we hung with it. And here's where we are. It was just, providential, I guess you might say.
So Stan, when did you decide, my dad's got a great business here. He's a one-man show. When did you decide to come into the business and your siblings?
My start date was the first summer. I was 16 years old. Actually, I was 15. I turned 16 that fall. I was 15 when I actually got paid. I had my own bench, had my own set of tools, and I could repair saws that people brought in. It was mostly the minor stuff that I was allowed to work on, but the thought of going somewhere else after school never occurred to me. In fact, one summer during school, I worked in Germany at the factory in Stuttgart, and that kind of confirmed it, because by then I was pretty much on a first name basis with everyone in the Stihl family. I'd gotten to know the corporate guys in Germany because I'd been attending meetings with my dad, and I just never thought about doing anything else.
How's your German?
Nicht so gut.
How many dealers do you have across your territory? So you have Southern Illinois, Peoria South, you have almost the whole state of Missouri, or the whole state of Missouri?
We have the whole state of Missouri now since 1992.
Is there any other states involved now?
We have all of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, except for 10 counties on the Louisiana border.
There's almost no town you can walk into and not see some of your products then.
Right.
Here in Malden, Missouri, we have Sandy Small Engine Repair.
When I go on a guy trip, these guys I've been told a number of times, don't wear any Stihl clothing, because about everything I have has Stihl on it. Today I don't, but don't wear any Stihl stuff, because everybody wants to tell you their Stihl story. Anywhere, just about anywhere. If we have time, I'll give you an example. Debbie and I, my wife and I, were in the Rocky Mountain National Park, and with another couple from Jackson, and we were at a lookout. We spend a lot of time out there. So we're at one of these lookouts where you're looking out at the range and the mountains and stuff. And another lady said, I saw another couple, they were trying to do a selfie. I said, I'll take that picture for you. So I got the camera and I took their picture. And then in the distance, you could hear a chainsaw. And because there was a beetle kill going on. And my wife says, there's a chainsaw. And you guys probably don't like that, but we actually don't mind it. I had a Stihl logo on. So, and this lady, she said, we don't mind it either because we sell Stihl. And I said, oh, well, nice. Where's your dealership? And the man said, he said, we have a small dealership in a small town. I said, what's the name of your dealership? He says, just an Ace Hardware. And I'm thinking, we've got about 150 Ace Hardwares as dealers. I said, well, where? He said, you probably never heard of Cape Girardeau. I said, are you George? And he looked at me, because I'd never met him, but my son had set him up as a dealer, and our other son, who was at SEMO at the time, actually put his display system in. Are you George? He looked at me like, who the heck are you? I said, do you know Scott and Brad? And then the wife said, yeah, we know Scott and Brad. How do you know Scott and Brad? And my wife said, those are our boys.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Yeah, it was so fun. That kind of thing happens more frequently now and then, since we have more dealers, and the product line that Stihl has appeals to just about everybody.
So Stan, most people think that Stihl just has the end product, but I picked up in what you were saying, a lot of your business is parts. It's not just the whole chainsaw. So a lot of your distribution is servicing those machines, right?
Exactly. That is the probably the secret sauce in Stihl's success is service after the sale, and the dealers that service the product. Stihl dealers are known as dealers who support the product after they sell it. You know, so often now when you go and buy a product, it says on there, do not return this product to the retailer. It gives you an address to send something to or an 800 number to call if you need service. It's not the way with Stihl. When you buy a Stihl product, you take it back to the dealer who will repair it for you or get it repaired for you. And the reason is that we can supply him with the parts necessary to fix the product.
What percentage is parts versus end products in your regions?
Well, as far as dollar sales, it's about 25%. And it was higher at one time, but the product is a lot more dependent.
Which means it never tears up, right?
Yeah, the product is much better. Well, the other thing too is more and more of the product is used by residential, and they're not as hard on the product. If you'd asked me that question 30 years ago, I'd say it was about 40% because it's all commercially used and used a lot and used in rough areas and it breaks down. Since more of it's consumer, there's less of it. But we do have the part. If you need it, if our dealers need it, we can ship it to them. And usually if they order it today, they'll have it tomorrow.
Well, Stan, I could sit here and talk to you about Stihl all day long. I'm just very interested in how you got to this point today.
I could probably talk about it longer than you do.
I've got a million more questions. I'm going to ask you a few more, but do you have sales reps that actually go out and set up new dealers? Because it seems like, to a certain extent, our viewers probably think, wow, you've got the market saturated. You've got all the stores. So new growth in Stihl products.
It's changing. You know, 20 years ago, the outside sales guy's job was to convince someone to carry the line. And now we spend more time telling someone who's interested in it why we can't set them up with the product line because there's someone else in town. So what these guys do, we have about a 10% attrition rate, so we lose about 10% of our dealers every year. So that's about 150, 160 dealers that we have to set up. And then we're growing at a rate of about 5% a year. We add about 5% to the total every year. Now, and then the other thing, of those dealers, their turnover is pretty good. And so we're constantly needing to train the new people, the new floor people, on the product. And we have some online training products that make it easier for those guys to go on and have little 15-minute vignettes, teach them about the product. We call it the last 10 feet. So no matter how much we spend on marketing and how good of a job we do getting people in the door, what matters is what occurs in that last 10 feet when they walk up to the Stihl display. If they have a good experience, if the person they're talking to is knowledgeable about the product, they'll walk out with a piece of our equipment, maybe 2 or 3, because of the product breadth, the width that we have right now. And with the online tools, and online information that's available, more and more people are walking in knowing as much or more about the product than the person that's working at the dealership. So there's a lot of training that goes on with dealers. Even dealers have been around a long time, so they have their hands full.
We're going to move on from Stihl, even though I've got a million more questions, okay? Stan, you have written 4 books, one being on Amazon's bestseller list for a few weeks. What first made you interested in writing? Tell us a little bit about each of your books and what inspired them. We got them right here in front of us.
Well, I started writing for a publication we had in the company that went out to our dealers on a monthly basis, talking about different issues in the industry, products. And so every month I would write a 800 to 1,000 word column, and actually won a couple of business awards. The guy who was publishing our newsletter said, "You should enter this contest." I said, "I'm not going to enter that contest." So he did, and I won a Silver Quill Award. So I'm thinking, hey, I'm a pretty good writer. And along the same time, my wife, who grew up in St. Louis, when I would get together with the guys I grew up with, and we get to talking about some of the crazy things we'd done, and she would say, "You need to write a book because that's just not normal." I think she said normal, or people would be interested in hearing that. You should write a book. And so somebody would tell me, hey, remember the time we did that? She would write that down, put that, and I started carrying a little notebook around. And so the word got out that I'm working on a book. I wasn't working on a book. I was just making notes in a little binder. But my mom found out, okay, and she said, when are you going to write your book? And then she got sick. And just before she was dying, and she died. But before she died, she said, promise me, she kept saying that, promise me you'll write your book. And she said that, I don't know, a dozen times within a month of when she passed away. And so finally I said, okay, Mom, I promise I'll write a book, just to make her stop asking. And then she started saying, you promised. And then she died. So there I was. I had to write a book.
And you did it 4 times over, so you really kept your word.
But here's the funny thing. It was a really humbling experience because, so I thought I was a writer because I won an award writing a column. That's 1,000 words is one thing. And the way I describe it is the difference between someone who runs a 100-yard dash and someone who runs a marathon. I started writing a book. I realized I had no idea what I was doing. And so I spent about a year studying on how to write a book because I was trying to run a marathon whenever I was pretty good at running a 100-yard dash. And it's a completely different discipline. And so I did. I went to a couple book weekend things and talking to people, and this Elements of Stihl, Strunk and White. It's a 100-year-old book, and if you only have one book when you're getting ready to write, that's the one you need to have. And so I got the bridge. That was the first book. And so the story begins and ends on a bridge, and the idea there was what I wanted is for the reader. That's one thing you have to know when you're going to write a book. What do you want the readers to experience? What I wanted the readers to experience was, I wanted to provoke their own memories. And so they would identify someone they knew growing up with one of the characters in the book. There were some people that weren't happy with the way I treated a character. It's funny because there was this argument one day after like a book event at Barnes & Noble. These people I grew up with showed up with a little spreadsheet, and across the top was people in the book, and across this way were real people, and they were arguing over who was who. And I go, no, they're all blended together. Nobody's really interesting enough to be a character in a book. And they started arguing with me. I said, look, wait a minute. I wrote the book, okay? I think I know who the characters are in there.
Oh, you mean they thought they were real people from Marble Hill?
Yeah. They said, this name is this person. And then they said, well, I don't like the way you treated Melody. There's a character in the book named Melody. I don't like the way you treated Melody at the end of the book. And I didn't mistreat anybody, but this little boy fell for another girl instead of this girl. And you got to write another book to fix that, and whatever. Because, I completed the promise to my mom. So, okay, I got the book. I'm done. So then I wrote Paperboy. And Paperboy is a book that... this was the second book right here. My goal there was to cause people to realize that if you get to know people real well, you will realize that no matter how silly they look, they have some kind of an endearing quality to them. And you just need to spend the time to get to know them. And the reason it's Paperboy is because as a paperboy, when it's time to collect, you get to see the inside of every house where you deliver. I saw the inside of more homes than the ministers at the churches did. And so the whole point of this book was for people to read it and identify with the character, and then have a little more patience with people. You get to know them. And then the longest year was, as a boy, 15, when you're 15 to 16, that's your longest year because you're dying. I was the youngest guy, there were two guys in my class younger than me, but I was almost the youngest guy in the class. I didn't turn 16 until I was a junior in high school. And that summer, when I was 15, so you're too old to ride a bicycle, but you don't have a driver's license, so you're like walking or you're begging people to come pick you up, and it's an agonizing year between 15 and 16. Between. You are. That's why I call it the longest year, and this book opens with the oldest kid getting his driver's license, and then they're all dealing with the agonizing wait until they get their license, and there's things that happen along the way. So then, okay, so I've written some novels, and the Germans really like the novels. The people that... They work for Stihl in Germany. And the reason they like American books because reading them helps them with their English. And so a lot of the people in the factory had read my books. And so this is 2014. Stihl was celebrating the 40th year of opening the factory in Virginia Beach. And so, and opened the factory in 1974. So Stihl had been, we became a distributor in 14 years before that. So I'm standing there in the big convention hall in Virginia Beach with Peter Stihl, talking to him. And one by one, people would come up and thank him for bringing Stihl to America in 1974. And my dad had just died in February of that year. And I started getting a little emotional, thinking, what a bunch of crap. These people don't realize all these guys that introduced Stihl in America going 14 years before the factory came here. And I looked at Peter Stihl. I said, so many of these people don't realize Stihl was here before 1974. And he laughed. He said, yeah, you should write a book. And I thought, okay. And then the wheel started turning. So these are fiction. With fiction is a lot of fun because you're God with a little G. You can just make up stories and something crazy comes up in your head, how to handle a scene, you just do it. The nonfiction was hard because you're slaved to the truth. I knew the questions to ask. I knew the people who to ask about. Half of them were already gone, but I knew the families enough to go and search and find out the details. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. There was some travel. But there was some rewarding experiences along the line.
So Stan, do we have book number 5 started now?
It's in there.
It's in the hopper?
It's in there. It's going to be called The Bench. And that book is going to be told from the point of view of the old codgers that sit on the courthouse bench. I'm going to have a Democrat, a Republican, a Protestant, a Catholic, and then some other person to kind of moderate the fussing that goes on between this group of guys who are really good friends with drastically different senses of ideology. At the same time, at the courthouse, all those people are coming and going, and so that's.
Is this a true story?
No.
Well, Stan, let's move ahead. You are a pilot. How did you get started flying? And tell us about some of your experiences. I know that flying is a hobby that's near and dear to your heart.
So I learned how to fly. I flew a lot with my dad growing up, and in fact, by the time I was in 8th grade, he had me in the left seat. I didn't have a license, but I could fly. I could reach the rudder pedals, and so I just always did it. Then as we expanded with the warehouses in Kansas City and Wichita, the opportunity to fly, for the company that's a lot cheaper. You're flying with a purpose and going somewhere. There's a lot of opportunity to do that. And so while flying, got to meet a lot of guys who are in aviation, and over the years became partners with a couple other guys in Cape, and we bought some planes and put it on the rental program at Cape. I've had some pretty cool trips. A couple of us flew the Lewis and Clark trip. There was the 100th anniversary of flight and the 200th anniversary of the Lewis and Clark Journey of Discovery were the same year. So we flew the Lewis and Clark trip in a Cessna 172, never got more than 1,000 feet off the ground, except when we went over the Bitterroots Mountains. It took us about 5 days, but we stayed on the Missouri all the way to Three Rivers, and then we flew that. And that's the way to see the Lewis and Clark journey. And we had the journals with the lat longs, and so we knew what their journal entries were as we passed by each point along that. That was fun. Then I met up with a guy, and I had a chance to fly the Atlantic in a Cessna. I flew a Cessna from here to Athens, Greece once. Recently, I have a plane. One of the planes I have now is a 1966 Cherokee 140 that originally belonged to my industrial arts teacher in high school. He owned it over 20 years, and a guy who was a year behind me in school owned it for over 20 years. And now I have it. I've had it for about 5 years now. And I take kids for rides. And I have more fun doing that, I think, than the kids do, because it's just so much fun to see their face. And recently I've been taking my 8-year-old granddaughter, and I have a little booster seat, so she can't reach the rudders, but she can hold on to the stick. And she'll fly that thing for an hour at a time and keep it at the altitude within 300 or 400 feet. And I give her points to look at. And the most recent flight, we flew up and flew by the Arch, St. Louis Arch. So if you stay over the river, you can do it. You're talking to the tower. They know where you are and all that. And I've got a video of her holding on tight. She keeps looking at me because it was kind of bumpy. If it's bumpy, she wants to make sure that I can take control. But it's a video of her going by, keeping it over the river at the right altitude and looking at the arch as she goes by. And, those are moments you'll treasure forever. And so that's an aviation related.
Sounds like she's a pro already.
Yeah. Well,
I don't like those bumps either.
Well, I don't either, but anyway.
Stan, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It's been very educational. You kind of told us about your roots, but it's a true story of the American dream, the Crader family. Right there in Marble Hill. You can do it in your own small town,
That's right. Yeah,
Yep.
You don't have to leave home.
Yep. Have a lot of admiration for what y'all have done there.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here today.
Yes, sir.
Stan Crader, Stihl Products there, Marble Hill, Missouri. Thank you for joining us on Very Interesting. Stay tuned for our next episode.